What's up, Wholesale to Freedom fam? So in this video, I'm going to go over a presentation I did for a local real estate group that I was asked to speak at. In that video, in that presentation rather, I went over all of my biggest wholesale deals, what it's done for me in my life, as well as my biggest wholesale deal of $213,000. So throughout the entire video, you're gonna get a bunch of gems, so stay to the end to get the most out of it. Be sure to like, subscribe down below, and I got a unique opportunity just real quick I want to present to you because it is a super unique opportunity. I'm in the process of creating a course for anybody who wants to learn how to virtually wholesale or locally wholesale, just like you see in the video I'm about to go over. Currently, it's half off.
What did he say?
To anybody who's interested. It's a work in progress. It's a living, breathing course. So what I mean by that is anybody who's interested in buying it is going to get it completely half off right now as I develop the course and refine it. Everything you need to get started is already in there. I'm just in the process of refining the videos. And because of that, you're going to get it half off. This is a once in a lifetime opportunity. If the link is down below, that means it's still available. If it's not, and you're in the future, I'm sure I'll have a different link for the full price. So if you're catching this in time, good for you. But here's the presentation. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, it's just the arrow.
Cool. I got it.
Okay, perfect.
Appreciate it.
So can I sit here, Josh, and just do it for me? Well, he's going to do it, right?
Yeah, I'll just do it.
Do it live!
Okay.
If that's cool.
You just can't stand in front of it.
Yeah, I'll try not to. So, what's up, everybody? My name's Alex Harshman. For those who don't know, my brand is Wholesale to Freedom. I have a YouTube channel. I have a course that I'm developing right now. But for the most part, for the last 2-3 years, I was mentoring people on a weekly basis. I had about 500 plus students. Some of them, I don't know if you heard earlier, were making over $200,000 on one deal and subsequent deals from there on. So just a lot of success from my students. And I'm going to talk about what success is. But real quick, off topic, is anybody in crypto at all? A couple people. So I'm heavily into crypto, and we were talking about the interest rates and things like that. So what I'm hearing through the grapevine is they're hoping they're going to drop, and that's what crypto is waiting on right now. Even if it's just a little bit. Trump just bought $200 million worth of Ethereum. So if you're not in crypto, I mean, I'm not a financial advisor, but now it seems like a good time. So back to real estate. So Wholesale to Freedom is my brand. So if you look me up on YouTube, my name is Alex Harshman. You'll find me on there, but I have about 1,500 subscribers. I'm currently trying to grow it, so any love, support you can give me would be awesome.
What area you live in?
I live in Washington County. I was born and raised in Washington County. I lived in Boonesboro for a little bit. But for the most part, I grew up in that area. I left for the military for a little bit, and I came back, and so I've just been here. So real quick, I just want to talk about what is wholesaling. Who here does not know what wholesaling is? It's okay if you don't. So everybody knows what wholesaling is. Cool. For those who don't, wholesaling is selling your interest in the property. So essentially, we find a seller, we lock it up under contract. That gives us equitable interest, and then we can sell that interest to an end buyer. So we're not selling properties, right? We often hear, hey, I'm wholesaling a property, but that's not the case. So what we are doing is we're selling the contract to the end buyer because realtors are the ones selling properties. You can get in a lot of trouble. So if you are wholesaling and you're saying, hey, I'm selling this property, you can get in a lot of trouble if you're not licensed. So what exactly is success? So my story is from humble beginnings to success. Success to me is just knowing where you are right now, where you want to go, and the actions you got to take to get there, and consistently and actively taking those actions every single day. So a lot of us think, especially me when I first got started, it's like the classy car or the really nice cars, the really nice house, the riches, the finances, all that stuff. But really, it's just working towards that goal and enjoying the process. So it's hard to see on this PowerPoint presentation, but literally that's everything that I owned when my wife met me at the time. Everything I owned fit in the back of her Scion TC hatchback. So I just got kicked out of my dad's house not too long before that, and that computer there, actually I went to high school, a vocational school, and I did computer repair and networking, and my teacher felt so bad for me that he let me build my own computer and take it home for a project and never bring it back. So everything I own fit in the back of that car, and it's just a humble reminder for me like, hey, the power of wholesaling and why this is important, right? I'm up here to teach you about wholesaling, the power behind it. A lot of people think that you can only get into investing if you're buying and holding, or if you're flipping and fixing and flipping, things like that. But as you'll see, you can make just as much money, if not more, in any avenue you go into, but wholesaling is my strategy. I worked at Best Buy Mobile. That's where I got a lot of my sales skills before I got into real estate. And yeah, so I was making like $8.50 an hour or something like that. Not now. But then I joined the military. I went through a survival training. Anybody here know what SEER training is? Okay, so I went through SEER training. For those who don't know, I believe it stands for Survive, Escape, Resist, and Evade. And basically, anytime you're behind enemy lines or held hostage, they teach you how to handle that situation so that way you can get out alive. Or if you're in peacetime, get back to your country. So like Russia right now, we have an American citizen that just got arrested for having weed on him, and he's in prison for like 5 years. So how do you handle that situation, not put yourself in the hole? Through those techniques that I learned, I implement a lot of those into my wholesaling strategies, and some of those I'll give away to you today. So what was my big aha moment? Like, hey, maybe I should do something outside of the military. This trophy right here is a big reminder to me as to why I wanted to do something else. So in the Air Force, I worked at a training base. For those who don't know, a hierarchy for like military bases is you have the operational bases, the ones that are doing real world missions, and then you have the training bases, the guys that are just doing the training missions, so not as important. I got this award as somebody that was at a training base, and this award just says I was #1 in my job in the entire Air Force. And this is out of like 12,000 people. And this was in a job, mind you, that I didn't really care about and I wasn't passionate about. And you know what I got? I got a standing ovation with a room of about 150 people, and it lasted about 10 minutes. It was like, hey, this is cool. You did this. Now what? So I didn't get any extra pay. I didn't get any extra rewards. In fact, I got more responsibilities and more things tacked onto my plate. But it was just
a sweet trophy, though.
I got that sweet paperweight, so we're good. But that was just a big reminder to me, like, hey, imagine if I took this energy and this passion that I barely had in this career field and I applied it somewhere outside. I didn't know what I was going to do. My job didn't translate into the real world, but we'll kind of go into that right now. So I found my why, and what that was is we were having my daughter at the time, my first kid. They wanted to deploy me. I was on a 4-year contract, and where we were getting deployed, we weren't really doing too much, right? They were doing like 2 hours of work and then just sitting by for the rest of the day. So missing my daughter's birth for that didn't make a lot of sense to me. So I was like, you know what? I'm just going to wing it and take my chance. I'm going to go outside the military and see what happens. But like I said, my job didn't translate into the civilian world, so I was going to work for my dad. My dad had a hardwood flooring business, working really hard for 8 hours a day. For those who don't know, my dad's 6'5", 250-pound bodybuilder, and it's just him and I doing 5,600 square foot jobs, just laying wood all over the house. So, it was a lot of manual labor. And while we're both very into working out, he's just kind of nuts about it. And to him, it was like just an average day. For me, I did 4 hours, and like, hey, I'm done. There's got to be a better way. So that was what kind of led me into my next thing right here. Down at the bottom, this is one of my favorite pictures. This is my brother. For those who don't know, I met him when I was 14. So he was adopted really early on. I never got to meet him. And when I did meet him, we had a lot of synergy going. So he was very business-oriented, very entrepreneurship-minded, and we just kicked it off. So, whenever we got to talking and he finally got married, he had a destination wedding. I had just gotten out of the military. I didn't have but like $5,000 in my bank account. And he's like, hey, I want you to come to my wedding. And it's like, I don't know if I want to do that. I only have $5,000 in my account. This is cost like $3,000. So it's going to be all my money. It ended up being the best decision I ever made. Because at the end of it, him and I were talking about real estate, and he was like, I want to buy a house and have my tenant pay for the house while I live in it. And something in my head just like clicked. I was like, hey, man, that makes sense. Real estate's the avenue. So I started looking up real estate videos, watching YouTube, reading books 8 hours a day. I was watching Grant Cardone. Who knows who Grant Cardone is? Yeah, so that guy's nuts. But he convinced me I was going to buy an apartment with $2,000. I didn't have any money. I just had $2,000 left. So I got home and I got to work. like I said, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I just started reading books, watching content, and just networking. And through that, I read a book by Bigger Pockets, How to Invest in Real Estate with Little to No Money. They talk about joining Bigger Pockets, which is like Facebook for investors. I put myself out there, and I wish Bill was here, but Bill was the first person to reach back out, and he said, hey, would you like to have lunch? I said, absolutely. He said, I want to talk about wholesaling, teach you a little bit about wholesaling. I said, great. I wasn't really interested in wholesaling, and I must impress the guy because he offered me a job that night later on, and through them, I started cold calling people. I think this was our first 3 deals. So I had no idea what I was doing. They gave me a blank template that said, hey, here, fill out this information, and if you fill it out and it looks good, let's get it under contract. That was my criteria. Didn't know what I was doing. My first call, I got cussed out. I remember I was in Bill's Keller Williams office, and he had his assistant or something in there, and she listened to my first call where I got cussed out, and I just sat there and stared at the screen for 4 minutes after it happened because I was like, I don't know if I'm built for this. So, but after 500 calls, not really know what I'm doing, I got my first 3 contracts, and I learned a really big lesson there. It cost me a lot of money. That would have been a $36,000 wholesale fee that ended up being $13,000. And that big lesson was don't tell your buyer what you have it under contract for. Nobody was there with me with the showings, and I was like, yeah, I can handle it. The buyer asked me, how much you got it for? And I was like, oh, it's for this amount. He's like, oh, okay. Renegotiated me 24 grand, so I learned that lesson early on. Bill and Mike were like, hey, it's okay this time, but don't do it again. But through them, I actually met another local investor. Some of you may know him, some of you may not, but I did about 40 plus deals as a disposition manager for him. So what that means is I was responsible for everything after the contract, from transaction coordination to selling the deal to showing the properties. And I got to tell you, I learned so much in that first year. 40 deals in your first year is a lot. It was like going through the master's class without graduating high school. Of course, it's just one half of the equation, but for some people, that's the hardest part. So I learned a lot through that. I learned a lot what to do and what not to do. And then after a certain amount of time of that, I said, you know what, I want to do this on my own. And I had a $50 a month marketing budget. And from that $50 a month marketing budget, I pulled a $65,000 deal after 7 months of consistently marketing. And that's when it was like, hey, this is enough for me to go out on my own. $65,000 was more than I've ever made in 1 year, let alone 1 month. So for me, I was like, man, this is awesome. And then a mentorship opportunity came up like a week later. Hey, invest almost more than $50,000 to work with me one-on-one and learn how to wholesale. Crap, I know that's the right answer, but how do I let go of this money that I just made, let alone all the money that I've made, more money than I've ever made in my life? And so I learned from the books I was reading, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. A lot of us got into real estate because of that. You got to lose your attachment to money in order to gain it. And that's what I did. So it ended up being one of the best decisions I ever made. Like I said, I landed that big deal, my first one, not really knowing what I was doing. But that picture on the bottom is the calendar where I wrote life-changing moment. So this is me and my mentor. Some of you might know him, Kong from Wholesale to Millions. Does anybody know who he is? So a couple people. But he's got like 500,000 people on YouTube that subscribe to him, over 1 million followers on TikTok, and he virtually wholesales. So all across the country, never sees a property, never goes out to it, never sees a buyer, never goes to a title company. He just sits behind his computer and collects a check. Of course, there's more moving parts than that. You still got to make the calls whenever you're starting out and do all the nitty-gritty stuff, but you're doing it from the comfort of your home. So how many of us would rather buy a flip, wholesale a deal, whatever it is, completely virtual, and all you need is an internet connection? Would you rather do that, or would you rather go to the property every single time, manage people, all that stuff? So for me, my business, I got very privileged, I feel like, because I learned from some all-star people how to do this so that I wouldn't have to go. I did that for my first year, wasted a lot of time going out to the property, showing it to buyers. All the stuff that I didn't want to do, I got it out of the way my first year. So once I made the decision, like, hey, this is the convenience lifestyle and the convenience business that I want to be in, I just went full on it. Of course, it didn't come without its hurdles. I did really well. My first year I did 6 figures, and then 2020 hit. I was in the middle of a couple wholesale deals. Of course, everything stopped. The government said, hey, don't pay your rents, don't do this. everybody was freaking out. Fires were happening in the streets all over. And I missed out on a couple big wholesale profits just because of that. So I obviously had to pivot strategies, figure out what's going on. And it got to a point where I was spending more than I was making. So I had to pivot even harder in figuring out, how do I do this differently than most wholesalers in the industry? And I feel like that's what separates me and what I teach from everybody else. Because a lot of people, who here wholesales actively? Okay, so a lot of people, unless you have a really good lead source, like an internal lead source, you have to pull a list, skip trace it, contact that person, and that's where they stop. They pull a list, they skip trace it, they contact it, they pull another list, rinse and repeat. It wastes a lot of time, money, and energy. So what's the other way around that? Well, you can go a little bit deeper. People pull this list of 10,000 people, and they say, Alex, I got done this list in a week. I didn't get any deals. Well, how many people did you actually contact? Probably like 10. So there's over 9,000 people you haven't contacted on that list, and I want you to change your mindset on, like, how many prospects do you actually need to live off of for a year? How big of a list do you guys think? Like, just throw out some numbers. If you were to pull a list, let's say PropStream or from List Source, whatever it is, how big of a list do you think you need to survive for a year?
Our lists are about 50 people.
50 people? That's right, that's along the same lines I'm thinking. But I was going to say 1,000, but 50 is just as accurate.
Yeah, it's just as accurate.
Yeah, it's just as accurate. But if you can contact 50 people, there's a deal in there somewhere, and if you're good enough, you can make that spread big enough to last you for the year. Of course, this depends on your business and living expenses, but just from a list, let's just say 1,000, you could live off of that for a year. But if you focus on contact ratio versus, hey, I'm just dialing doesn't mean anything. You're not making any traction. So I had to figure out how to do that. So I'm going to run through a couple of my wholesale deals. This is my first one. I was talking about the $65,000 deal. I probably spent about 4 hours on this. I don't know, 4 hours to make $65,000 seems pretty good to me. And this was in New Orleans, and this one's a really cool one because remember what I was talking about, pivoting strategies? This is a real-life implementation of that. So I was actually researching this lot of land here. That's where our lead came in, and I was like, you know what, this lot is overpriced. He wants too much. But then on Google Street View, I saw that building in the back. And I don't know if you can see it, but it's a 16-unit apartment complex. It's completely vacant, completely gutted. And I said, you know what, that sounds interesting. So I went over to it. I looked inside, on Google Street View, whatever it is, because I'm in Hagerstown and this is New Orleans. But I underwrote the deal because I watched Grant Cardone a bunch at the beginning of my career. I learned how to do a cap rate, underwrite a deal based off of what it could rent for, and those who invest in apartments know that the value can be increased incrementally, just so easy, by minimizing expenses or increasing your income. So, we're talking you can increase the value by hundreds of thousands of dollars by saving a couple $100 a month, one way or another. So I determined that this property could be worth about $1.5, $1.7 million after it was all said and done, and the owner only wanted $300,000. But before I got a hold of the owner, I had to figure out who he was. So I looked it up on the tax record. Most of us know how to do that. And it was owned by an LLC. Who here doesn't go after LLCs if they're wholesaling? Does anybody stay away from them? So a lot of people are taught that, hey, LLCs are not who you should go after because they're not motivated, right? You're looking for distressed property owners. My biggest deals, almost all those ones and the ones I'm going to show you, have been from LLC owners. Just because it's in an LLC doesn't mean that they're not motivated. And this person, like I said, they wanted $300,000. I knew that I could wholesale this at $400,000 or less, and it needed about $600,000 worth of repairs. So immediately I had a guy at $400,000, $100,000 wholesale. We're talking about an hour of work. And he went to go look at it. He said, hey, actually I need to be at 75. It needs more work than what we thought, and you can only get about 12 units out of it because of the codes now. So I was like, you know what, 75 is a little bit lower than I wanted, but hey, if you're ready to move forward today, we can get it done. And we made it happen. So we closed on that. That was a $75,000 deal.
So did you find like a realtor down there for that guy to see it?
That is one of my strategies, but that one I just put it out there, and through my buyer's network that I had built myself, just through networking with people at RIAs virtually. They usually have a website that you can post your deals, and people will inquire from previous deals or whatever. You build that relationship, and somebody I had worked with actually sold a deal to before he ended up buying it.
That was not listed?
No.
Just skip trace the owner, LLC, open corporates or whatever?
Open corporates is exactly what I use, and then I went to True People Search because I was balling on a budget, and I called like 30 numbers, and it ended up being the correct one. So.
And he was willing to sell?
Yeah, he was.
For a while?
He was somebody in the government that was, I don't know what he was, but he just didn't have the time to deal with it. He just like, hey, I'm not going to take less than 300, but if you want it, it's yours. He said, I don't care how you do it. I know you guys wholesale, whatever. I said, sure, okay, whatever.
Flooded out from Katrina or something?
Probably, yeah. He didn't really say because I think he acquired it afterwards, but I think it was a project he wanted to take on and just never dealt with it, which usually happens. It happens a lot. And then this was my biggest one in October last year, $213,000. This one I spent probably about 4 hours on it as well. So how many of us would love to do a flip that costs us 4 hours, or 4 hours of our time to make $200,000? Well, this was a 30-day payday, and I didn't have to buy the property. I didn't have to use any of my own money. I didn't have to do anything. And I actually found a realtor who found us a buyer. So for all my realtors in here, a lot of people think that they don't like to work with wholesalers because wholesalers are bad. But if I called up Josh, let's say Josh, for example, and I said, hey, Josh, I got a deal. It's off-market opportunity. I have too many projects going on. Do you have any investors, cash buyers you work with that might be?
Like 5 of them, and one of them are in the room right now.
Awesome.
When can we see it?
Hey, at the price we have it, you're going to get paid about a $30,000 wholesale fee for about an hour of work. So before he even said yes, most times they're like, well, I don't know. But if you say something like that, hey, this is going to be a big fee for you. Now they're like, hey, I know everybody. But if you're lucky, they will say, hey, I got somebody right away. And I love working with real estate agents. Early in my career, I would say real estate agents kill deals, but that's because I was in their territory trying to wholesale listed properties. And while you can do that, it's just frowned upon. So, yes, yes. So I've wholesaled. Yep.
But yeah, no, a lot of realtors are afraid of wholesalers of that term. A lot of fun stuff too. And we wrote that one. Was there only one, or we've done more than one?
I feel like we've done a couple.
I feel like we've done a couple too.
Yeah. So I wholesaled Jeff a property, a flip. How much you make on that?
Yeah. Now I'm talking about bringing a buyer, a retail real estate buyer, to your wholesale.
Oh yeah, yep.
Or the one off Miller's Church. So,
And Hancock.
yeah, and Hancock.
Yep. So Jeff's brought me a couple buyers a couple times, and yeah, we're not afraid to pay people.
What's the spread on that one?
This one?
Yeah, purchase price. And,
So this one was in Sammamish, Washington, and that's a higher price area. This property was worth 1.5 as is.
Oh my gosh.
I locked it up for 1.1, and we sold it for 1.75, and then the realtor added his fee on top. So the buyer ended up just purchasing it, and this is how it came out on the HUD. So technically it was 185, but you know this looks better than 185. So yeah, in those higher price markets, that's where I like to be, obviously because there are bigger spreads, and there's a lot more buyers to pull from. And when you have a bigger buyer pool, it makes the process so much easier. This was such a hassle-free process. You know, it was my biggest one. My smallest deals were the biggest headaches I ever had. So it goes the same with everything in life. If you have a small flip with a small profit, it's probably going to give you the most headaches versus a big flip, big profits. You got more going on.
There's also more wiggle room, too. There's more room for error.
Yep. And for most of the people wholesaling who have a business like mine or are just doing a lot more volume than I am, 70% of their deals, when they lock them up, aren't deals. And they have to go back and renegotiate. So that's another skill you have to learn in this business in order to be able to make these deals work.
You said a bigger buyer pool in the over $1 million market?
Yes.
There's a lot of buyers in the over $1 million.
There were people jumping at
The
this.
average median home price in America is not $1 million.
Well, you got to think it's for the market, though, right? Like, so it's not like he's selling $1 million homes in a $300,000 market. Like, for instance, someone mentioned DC. Like, you go to DC, the average price is that, right? So if you're in a higher price point market, right?
Yes.
Like, that's where you're at. Yeah, if there's $1 million deal in Hagerstown, you probably want to avoid that.
Not a lot of buyers.
Not a lot of buyers.
Was this a
Unless it's like a commercial deal or big.
This was just a homeowner who didn't want to have to deal with the process of selling his house, and he needed to sell it quick. So
Absentee, vacant.
he lived in it. This guy was a baller too. He had a G-Wagon and everything.
You paid a lot for convenience.
I'm the same way. So I will pay more for convenience than I will.
So how'd you be able to reach out to him?
He found us. So I started doing Google Ads, and that's all I do now. It's just a lot better. Obviously, the leads are better. But yeah, he called us. So he wanted our service just as much as we wanted to help him. But yeah, it didn't make sense to me, but hey, for most people it does. Save a couple $100,000, I don't know. But what's really cool about wholesaling is it brought me a lot of wealth. And how did it bring me a lot of wealth is I bought a couple properties here I'll go over with you that I have zero money into. So all my properties I own, and when I say that, obviously I put money up front ahead of time, but whenever I get done renovating it, I refinance it. It's worth a lot more than what I bought it for and put into it. And I can actually pull money out to live off of or to put into another property. It's called the BRRRR process. Does anybody not know what that is? I'm going to tell you what it is anyway. So buy, renovate, rent, refinance, repeat. And it's my favorite strategy. And for the last 2 or 3 years while I was coaching, this is how I live. Because I only have to do one deal a year to pay my living expenses, because my living expenses were low at the time. And my business expenses were low because I was focusing on coaching, which was like a 4-hour commitment a week. So I bought this one in Hagerstown for $145. I put $5,000 into it. Probably could have got it done in less time, but it took me 2 months because I did everything myself. And it was just a matter of painting a unit, putting down flooring, and maybe replacing a couple things. But if somebody was more inclined than I am on how to do that stuff, they probably got it done in the first week. But I watched YouTube videos, had no idea what I was doing, nobody to help me, and I just watched YouTube videos on how to do it. So I laid laminate floors or whatever it is, LVPs. I did that all myself. It was just a nightmare. But we got it done. So we put $5,000 into it, and it appraised for $290,000. So I was all in $160, it appraised for $290. A cash out refi at $215, pulled $65,000 in my pocket, tax-free, because debt is not taxed. I could live off that $60,000 for about 2 years at that time. So I didn't have to do any other deals. I could just enjoy the cash flow, enjoy the money, just do whatever. So I worked about probably 1 to 2 months out of the year the last 2 or 3 years doing this method. And that's just one property. This is my Two Bros duplex. So my brother and I started a business called Two Bros Holdings, and we bought this duplex together. This duplex, the homeowner was really hard to get a hold of. She was really hard to work with. She's like, I can't get you into the property. The tenants aren't cooperating, and they weren't. I showed up to the property. I knocked on the door, said, hey, I'm buying this property. You're going to let me in, or we're going to have issues. And they let me in. So we ended up walking the property. It was a nightmare. Both sides were not paying. They were behind on their utilities. We bought it for $85,000, put about $40,000 into it, and it appraised for $215 about 2 months later. So now it cash flows around $700 to $900 a month. Cash out refi at $160, pulled out about $10,000, $15,000. So my brother and I didn't have any money into it. We got to split that $10,000 to $15,000 to put towards the next one. How many of these can you guys do a year? As many as you want, right? Because you don't have any money into them. And this is my favorite one. This is the one Bill and Mike actually helped me, and they lent on. So this is 4 units, 2 single families, a 2-unit building, and a big 2-car garage. It had 2 trailers on the property as well, but I had to demo those, unfortunately. And the county only approved it for 4 units, so I was stuck with what it was. But I bought it for $150. At first, the seller wanted $325. I said, hey, what's going on with it? Hey, it doesn't have a well. It has a cistern. It's got 3 septics that I haven't inspected in a while. I've owned it for 20 years, haven't improved it at all. I just want out of it. Okay, well, putting a well in is a very risky situation because you got to make sure it has, enough room and that you can actually pull water. And she was like, I don't want to deal with that. So, I need to be at 200. And then after doing a little bit more research, we walked the property a little bit more, found out it needed a little bit more than what I thought. I said, hey, listen, here's the good news, here's the bad news. Good news is I still want it. I need to be at 150. I didn't even say 150. I said, I still want it, but there's just too many repairs for it. Can you work with this at all? And she's like, I can't go any lower than 150. I said, it's a little higher than I wanted, but I'll take it. So I ended up buying it for 150. put $200,000 into it. Took me about a year and a half. Another thing, I don't manage my renovations at all. It probably cost me more than it should have. Probably took me more time than it should have. But my property manager managed all of this. The only thing I dealt with, and of course it was the most overpriced thing, was the well. I got screwed on that, but that's because I managed it properly. That's why I don't manage or do anything, because I break more things than I fix. But she managed it. It rents for market rents once it's stabilized are going to be about $57,000 to $6,000 a month, and it appraised a year ago for $715,000. All in at $350,000, it appraised for $715,000. I don't know. That sounds like a good deal to me. So I didn't pull any money out of that one actually, because somebody smart in this investor group that I used to go to a long time ago. I said, how do you determine if you pull out money or if you just leave it in there? He's like, well, do you need the money? I said, no. Okay, well then just leave it in the property. Okay. So that was easy enough for me. So I left that money in there. I put a line of credit on it actually, and now I use that for other investments. So it's a revolving line. So how was I able to do this? Was I something special? No, you saw where I came from. Everything I owned fit in the back of my wife's car at the time. I didn't have any money. I was a very awkward, shy kid in high school. If I had to do a presentation like this, I would get super nervous. I would lock up and be like, hey, I'm not doing that. But then I went to the military, and they volunteered me to do a couple things like public speaking and be a teacher, so I got used to it. And then through networking with people, I kind of got outside of that comfort zone. So anybody can do this. Do you have to be naturally good at anything? No. I mean, I'm naturally good, I feel like, at customer service. I'm really good at listening more than I am talking. That's why I was given 2 ears, 1 mouth. But, random people come up to me throughout the day and just say, hey, I'm having this problem or whatever. People I've never met before. I don't know if anybody else has that problem or somebody does that, but I get that often.
This
So
wife's in the room too, so I don't know how many husbands are willing to say I'm better at listening than talking in front of their wife.
That's what she knows all I do is talk.
It must be true. It must be true.
So, yep. But how was I able to do this? I had a proven script and a proven process, right? I learned from that mentor. I invested more than half the money I earned in that first deal, letting go of the need and want to have that money and just that attachment to it. By doing that, I streamlined my process on how to wholesale properties, and I learned the most efficient way to do it. And by going through that training in the military, I learned some positioning tactics that I would later use in some of these scripts and these tactics that I was talking about to position myself in the negotiations to win no matter what. To the point where I don't even make offers most of the time. I just ask them a question like, hey, can you work with us? Is this the best you can do? I don't even say a number anymore. If you say a number first in a negotiation, you're losing. So that's just my opinion. So if it's not emphasized enough, if you want to streamline your success, of course I could have figured it all out on my own. Eventually I'm hard-headed enough to do it, but I will fail 1,000 times before I get it right. And that's just who I am. I mess things up more than I get them right, but once I get them right, I 10x it. I can streamline that process by having a mentor. And you want to make sure your mentor is doing something that you're doing, because if you pick a mentor and they're not doing or living the lifestyle that you want, that's not a good mentor for you, in my opinion. So these are some of the tools and resources that I use to get some of those deals done, like that one in New Orleans. How do I find the owner? If they're an LLC, open corporates, like he said. Skip Genie, it's the best skip trace platform you'll find next to like some of the top providers that the FBI uses or whatever it is. But Skip Genie is about $70 a month. You get 100 skip traces per month with that, and you can purchase additional ones for 15 cents extra. I can find about 99% of the prospects I'm looking for. And so if you take that philosophy and you pull that list and you get like 20, 50 people that are on that list, incomplete data, they don't get skip traced, use this process of using Skip Genie to find their associates, their cousins, their brothers, their uncles, their neighbors. I will call anybody and everybody to get a hold of this person just to make a deal happen. Because an hour or two of my time to make $60,000 is worth it. And most people these days are not going to be doing that much work. They would rather just pull a list and call it. So go outside the box and use some of these tools. Driving for dollars, virtually locally. People think, hey, I got to go ride my bike around the neighborhood to do driving for dollars. Driving for dollars is simply driving around looking for distressed properties. You can do that on Google Street View. That's what I do. That's what I have my VAs do, which are my virtual assistants. I pay them $6 an hour to do it. How many properties do you think they can find in 8 hours? How many people do you think they can call? So it's just leveraging, these resources. And doing what everybody else is doing is not going to work, so. And connect with investor-friendly agents like Josh. And Bill. So these are just some of the YouTube interviews, for credibility. But this is his name's Andrew. He owned a pho restaurant, and he wanted to get into wholesaling. So after a year of 100,000 plus cold calls, no results for a year, he landed his first deal of like $283,000. I mean, that is the definition of grit and determination. Most people, they'll call a list of 1,000 people and say, hey, it's not working. But if you stick to the process, and he had a language barrier. English was not his first language, so it was very hard for him to make these cold calls, but he did it anyways. So that's what I'm saying. You don't have to be anybody special. And Tyler Austin, he owns the CRM that I use, REI Sift. I did an interview with him. This was his mastermind. I was part of his mastermind. So just really smart people I got the chance to interview and be with, and they got to interview me. And fast forward today, obviously these things are really nice to have. Never could imagine I would have them, but more importantly, I have a beautiful family. They're healthy, happy. I get to see them. I got to spend a lot of time with them. Last 2 to 3 years, I'd work a couple hours a week, and whenever they were having an event at the school, whatever it is, I got to be there. Did my business sacrifice because of it? I don't know, but I know that I don't regret it. So I built my business around the lifestyle that I want instead of my lifestyle around the business, and that's where most people get it wrong. So, and that's my TRX for anybody who's interested in Hellcats, but